Good morning, America. This is Christie Hutcherson on the front lines and in the fight every day for you, the American people. I'm so glad you decided to join us on this Saturday series. The storm is coming. We all actually know the storm is actually really here, but are you ready? And that's what we're going to do. We're going to be speaking every week with some experts in their fields and giving you the tools that you need to fight back, secure your families, and take back our republic called the United States of America. We are going to address first thing this morning because there's a new news out there that's buzzing that everybody is talking about, and you all know that, and that is the storm, Stormy Daniels. She is rearing her ugly head with the Communist Democratic Party again, and they are going after none other than our President Trump. So we're going to talk about that. And Patrick Byrne, I'm going to bring him on in just a second. So we're going to start with Stormy Daniels because the storm is here. Hi, Patrick. So what are your thoughts on President Trump and the New York prosecutors going after the President of the United States?
Well, why should today be different than any other day? This is what they've been doing for years. I think three things. One is the case is incredibly weak. It's only a campaign contribution. If he can argue that payment would have been made whether or not he was running for office, then it's not a campaign contribution to begin with. Secondly, this is not an act of strength from their side. Please be aware of that. It reminds me of, I used to play chess with a fellow in the Middle East 20, 30 years ago. And every time I would get ahead in the chess game, what he would, if he could, he would like drop a tissue on the floor, then go to pick it up. And as he did so, he'd knock the table over. And then we'd have to start again. That's what they're doing with this. We have them surrounded, so to speak. If the next 20 months, 19 months plays out without any interruption, they're in trouble, and they know it. And so this is their way of knocking the chessboard over. They need to change the rules. And the third thing is, my advice is calm and peace. I know all of you love 45, and all of us love 45. And I know a lot of people want to take to the streets and all this stuff. If you do, you're playing right into their hands. They're doing this in order to get you to do that. I wouldn't be surprised if right now there's some people, some Ray Epps around the country being contacted, various 50 different versions of Ray Epps in every state saying, get a protest going. We're going to and they're going to try to turn it violent. Because what's going on is Biden has signed away our sovereignty to the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization is going to declare, if they can get a bunch of violent protests stirred up in the United States, the World Health Organization is going to declare that MAGA is a pandemic, or extremism is a pandemic, or Christians are a pandemic, and governments have to suppress them. And that's the Philadelphia luring they've done to get us where they are. Now, we'll be able to fight that in court. His surrender of our sovereignty isn't viable and such. But all that said, the worst thing you can do is to go out and get violent and do anything that they can point to and trigger that chain of events. They're not doing this out of strength. They're doing this out of weakness.
Absolutely. You're correct, Patrick. And as you know, I was asked to speak a week ago at the United Nations in New York City, which I was really surprised that they even had somebody like myself invited there. Apparently, I don't know if they weren't watching my videos or what I've done in the last 3 years, or maybe there was another reason. But, one of the things that I took out of that, and I'm going to brief that on another time, but I want to kind of touch with this with you. Language matters. And this is for international counterterrorism laws, right? International law with the United Nations. And to your point, that Biden signed away our rights, even though a lot of constitutional lawyers like Chris Anall and others are saying, no, they can't do this. Well, they actually can, the way that they did it and the way it was written. I will disagree with them. And so then one of the languages that really peeked out at me was transnational extremist violence and racial and ethnic terrorism. Terrorists. And that's what they're going to start labeling. And that's what they want to do. Just like January 6th, you and I both were there on J6, Patrick, I believe. And And they had operatives all throughout that crowd. And that's what they want. They want us to get violent. They want us to pretend like we're going to go to the streets, and then they're going to rise up and try to get us and provoke us to be violent. And that is the last thing we need to do. They are losing, and that's the reason why they're running scared, and they're desperate to try anything.
No, that's fair. That's fair to say. Yeah, well, that's a fair analysis. And so we can't play into their hands, but that doesn't mean we sit quietly. Listen, I think we have them beat. I think I'm in the Trump 24 or sooner camp. I really think if you let us play this out, he's going to be in before 24. I think this is all going to be exposed. You know, the law it grinds slow but fine. It's been a terrible two and a quarter years. But we are really we're 2 years and 5 months into this. So we have 19 months. And if I think that we're going to actually win. And that's why they're taking such an extreme and provocative step such as this. It is ridiculous. It is ridiculous.
It really is.
Bill Clinton paid $850,000 to Paula Jones or something. You know, if these people didn't have double standards, they wouldn't have any standards at all.
Well, I mean, I remember the Monica Lewinsky, with the cigar. I mean, this is preposterous. They look at Biden right now, the president, the so-called president of the United States, Biden and his family. If you can't connect the dots with the massive corruption with China and the payouts to the Biden family, in my personal opinion, not only should this be impeachable offenses, these are illegal and quite frankly, I think treasonous.
It's very true. This is so serious. And like what you both are talking about here, you're really asking the people that are watching to think below the surface, underneath the surface, see what's actually going on. Don't be fooled by the headlines. Look and see what's going on at the bottom. Now, for those of you who just joined, Christie and Patrick, tell the folks why they need to stay on this broadcast the entire time, because you'll be covering a number of topics, including action items. Let's go to you, Christie, first. What are some of the things you'll be covering so that my friends that are watching, if you've got other plans, please change them. You have to watch this live and you have to share this with other people. Copy the link for this Rumble link, put it on social media so other people join. Christie, why should they stay here the entire time?
We are going to be talking about some very serious issues that impact your wallet and impact your communities and your family personally. And then we're going to give you actionable items on what you need, to do to protect that. You're not going to want to jump off. You're going to want to hear every single word, especially that Patrick has to say. Patrick is an incredible individual. He's a businessman. He knows what he's talking about. He's very well versed in the financial in the world. So we're going to be really delving down into a lot of things about what's going on, from the IMF to the World Economic Forum to your banking system and the crash that we believe that they're trying to orchestrate. So you're not going to want to get off this call. Please stay on. You're going to want to share it and get more people to listen today.
And my friends, you saw the link right above Christie Hutcherson there. I'll just put on the screen there. Have your friends text the word FIGHT to 91776, because this is the first in a series of programs that Christie Hutcherson, the team, are doing. So with that said, Patrick, what are some of the things that you want people to be thinking about as you make your comments for the next hour or so?
Well, I do think that people should be, so I think that we can win this, but I think people should prepare for, in case, it doesn't, in case things do go south. And what prepare means for you and your family. And I want to comment, it's been so revealing to me that women such as Ms. Hutcherson but women fighting for America have really stepped up and are the warriors here. How disappointing American men have been, in a sense, over the last 2 years in comparison to the women. The women understand what's going on and are willing to do something about it. But fortunately, that doesn't mean grab a gun or set an IED or something. This is something we're going to win peacefully and calmly. And in fact, if we don't do that, we're going to lose. If we play into any of their gambits again, like J6, and you're right, J6, John Sullivan's brother, James Sullivan, who is a patriot. John Sullivan is that Jada Next guy. His own brother has come out and said John Sullivan had 226 Antifa activists in that crowd that stormed the Capitol. So, the guy's own brother has said that. There's all kinds of videos of people confessing and such. So that's horrible, and it's horrible that they did that. That's Gene Sharp, Color Revolution stuff. But, you know, MAGA fell for it. Let's not forget, MAGA fell for it. And fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. We can't fall for this stuff again. I want to spend today, or I plan on telling you what to do to prepare for the worst case scenario, which is some sort of societal breakdown. And you do want to be prepared for that. And society would be much more robust if a lot of families took the time to prepare, which you can do tomorrow afternoon at the Home Depot and Target if you listen.
And
You
then
know, Patrick,
Christie,
I relate that to us in Florida. You know, I'm a Florida girl, born and raised. We weather storms all the time, hurricanes, and we're always prepared. I always have preparedness in my home, whether it's water, fuel, propane, extra types of money. And I don't mean cash money. And we're going to talk about that and get into what we think that you need to have. And there might be a little bit of a bumpy ride. There's going to be I equate it to a tornado or a hurricane where we're going to have an eye, right? The center, there's going to be a little bit of bumpiness and then calm, and then we might have some bumpiness again. So we want to prepare you so you can ride out the storm and weather it out, and then show you how to be in community with one another.
Exactly. This is what you're going to be listening to, my friend. So you can see why it's important. It's why when you have to text the word fight to 91776. So to get the ball rolling. In fact, before actually we go into that, you made a very key point, Patrick, because you were talking about how people participate. And Christie Hutcherson, you're out there, you're talking to people, you're a grassroots leader, you've been doing this for years and years and years. You've done this before this whole election situation happened as well. Talk to the people if they are running into the same position, Christie, because people are watching this and they need to be thinking, how do I get myself involved in action? How do I get other people involved? How do I encourage the men in my community to also participate? And you've figured out how to do that, Christie, because you have both men and women in your Women Fighting for Trump. Let's touch on that Patrick mentioned, and let's go right into the headlines on the banking that Patrick's going to comment. Go ahead, Christie.
Well, you know, you have to start with getting involved in organizations who are actually making a true impact. There's a lot of organizations out there with a lot of noise who aren't actually boots on the ground and who aren't actually doing anything. And they fool you and they bring you in. So you have to learn how to vet those organizations. On our website, for example, Raj, we have a 14-point plan to save America's future. We also have a battle ready plan. So you need to, America's Project as one of those, Patrick's organization, Women Fighting for America, we're actually doing what we say we're doing, and we're actually training you and educating you specifically on what and how you need to go about doing it. We will hold your hand through the process. Now, we're not going to hold it all the time. At the end of the day, you have to have that that will inside of you to actually act out. And I can tell you right now, and I think Patrick would agree, it is far too late to sit on the sidelines. It is time to engage if you really want to save this republic we call America.
My friends, you just heard it there from Christie Hutcherson, how to take action. She also mentioned 2 websites, and that is very, very important for you to be aware of, because we have the America Project that Christie just mentioned. Please go there. There's so many action steps and so many trainings. Probably won't be mentioning these websites as we get into the detail here, but please go to theamericaproject.com. That is Patrick's organization. And then also please go to WFFA.win. WFFA.win. All right, let's get right into it. So Patrick, we all are seeing the headlines. We see the bank closures, but that's actually not the entire story. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that is not being reported. So Patrick, what do people need to know as a reason for why they need to do the preparation you talked about just a minute ago, Patrick?
Okay, well, first I want to correct one little point. The America Project is no longer mine. I don't know if you saw the announcement a couple days ago. Did you see?
I did not. All right.
Tom Homan is now the CEO, but I thought it was still your organization.
Yeah.
That's your baby.
I always will have been the founder, but Tom Homan's now the CEO. And once he gets his sea legs, I'll probably back away from the chairman title as well. I'm just trying to say, Tom Homan's a wonderful, I view myself as Johnny Appleseed. I've spent my life starting organizations and building them and sort of turning the keys over and moving on to other projects. This is wonderful. Having him on as the head of the America Project. Oh yeah, what's going on? First thing people should know is whether it's financial collapse or something else, there is an attempt going on to destabilize our society. And of course, the southern border collapse is part of that. There are things you can do to prepare. I'd like to walk through some steps. The first step is you should go on the internet right now and order a book called 1 Second After. 1 Second After. I talked about it last night as we teased this. Do you mind if I tell this story again now that we have?
Go right ahead.
In 2005, in national security circles, there was a planning. Come on through if you're. There was a. Yeah, we're live though to 600 people. There was a planning session on what would happen if an EMP hit the United States. And what they discovered, it was a big war game. And what they discovered is that you've got, whether it's a financial collapse, EMP, Ebola, basically the same thing happens. And that is everything melts down we discovered that our society is much more frangible than people knew. The learnings from this exercise were codified in a book called 1 Second After. I think the cover of the book says it was written by a historian. The guy's actually somebody in the national security circles who wrote the book, and it was deliberately done to codify what they learned from the exercise. What they learned is we are connected in the United States. I happen to be in Italy right now, but in the United States, we're collected by invisible supply chains. And for food and fuel and pharmaceuticals, there's only 3 days of food in the cities at the tip of the supply chain. It's only 3 days of food, so that's 9 meals. The fuel itself gets transported around the country on diesel trucks that if they stop flowing, if they stop driving around, then the fuel then even the gas stations aren't filled, don't have fuel anymore. And then pharmaceuticals, there's 30 days of pharmaceuticals in the supply chain, which means, and 50% of Americans over 50 are walking around on drugs pharmaceuticals that if those run out, they're dead within 6 months. So things like insulin being one, heart medications, all kinds of things. So you have to prepare yourself for some kind of shock. Remember, as crazy as this sounds, this all has happened to us once before. In the early 1930s, in the Great Depression, FDR closed down the banking system for 2 weeks. And I could see something like that happening. So you need to make your family robust in the face of that. And the ways to do that, think of food, water, shelter, and money. You want to think of, to plot out at minimum a 2-week supply. Figure out what you would need to live in your home. Imagine a dirty bomb. We're going to go off, and I'm going to add layers of complexity to the analysis. But so first step is buy that book 1 Second After. Second step is make your household robust. Imagine a dirty bomb went off. If a dirty bomb, radioactive bomb goes off in your city or you're near, you're going to be told to shelter in place in your home and to put up, to try to tape the windows and stuff like that. Because if you stay inside for about 2 weeks, nature will take care of it. Rains and stuff would wash it away. So how would you keep your family inside for 2 weeks? You're going to need 2 weeks of food. And you really want to think in terms of money and real money, not this fiat currency we walk around with called a US dollar. Real money is gold, silver, or Bitcoin. I'd go with silver. And silver is $20 an ounce. Your little 1 ounce coins. Go and get. You should have, I don't, whatever your family situation is, but try to have like $500 at least, or 2 weeks of cash in silver coins. Those will become the first currency. It's been around for 6,000 years with no question. That's going to be immediately what society falls back to if the banks are shut down. And once you have your family robust for 2 weeks, think about 30 days, think about 3 months, think about 6 months. Got to say, the Mormons have this right. It's been for a century or more a part of the Mormon tradition that you build. I lived in Utah for 20 years. They have, people out there have 1, 2, 3 years of food in their basement, and it's all. So you've got, that's one thing you need to think about. And then the next level is to know this. If you're within a city, if you're near a city, this is what the thinking is. Within 3 days, there's going to be riots. And if the riots are not restored or stopped within 2 weeks, we go through a tipping point as a society in which we probably don't come back anytime, or it gets very ugly. So you want to be not within 150 miles of a city. And so you have to have a place to go, which means then the next level of your thinking is, okay, if things get bad, where are you going to go to? And you pick that out, let all your family members know you got some cousin in Dubuque, Iowa, or you got some cousin in Montana. You're working out ahead of time that's where you're going to go. You got to figure out everything you would need for that trip and try to get it prepared in your garage.
Patrick, let me ask you something. So if somebody doesn't have that type of network and they can't get out of the city, what can we give them? What kind of tools and advice can we give them to at least try to remain as safe as possible?
Well, you're going to have to deal after 3 days. When people's families start starving, they start turning into different people. You want to have you want to join some kind of an association that, whether it's the people in your apartment building all get together and talk about what your condo building are going to figure out what they're going to do in that situation. Of course, you want to have some arms and some ability to defend yourself. And the thinking is that it's going to turn into gangs very quickly. And you have to be able to deal with groups of people will not be able to move in larger than units of about 25 or 30 if they have not had military training. So you have to be part of some neighborhood watch or apartment where you would be able to stand against 25, 30 people that were coming to loot. And, as fanciful as this sounds, remember, before you were born, Christie, but back around 1978, there was a blackout in New York. And
a little older than that, Patrick.
It took about 12 hours before all hell broke loose and people were shopping with bricks, and they were flooding apartment houses and bad things were starting to happen before they restored order. So you want to have, you can't stand it alone. You got to get together with 5 or 6 families or your city block or your neighborhood. A very good thing to do is call your local police or sheriffs, go and see them, let them know you're a good citizen, ask them if they have any auxiliary units that you can join. I know all over the country there are militias syncing up with sheriffs. And, the sheriff may only have 100 or 200 people, but he's going to really, they are starting to build connective tissue into the militias, not because they want violence, but because it's going to be citizen militias working hand in glove with sheriff departments that keep things copacetic in the counties.
You make a really good point, because in that 14-point plan to save America's future that we created, Women Fighting for America, 2 years ago, one of those is how you engage with your local sheriffs, because that is really key. The other thing is how to develop community co-ops. We are rolling out, we've done several trainings all over the country. We've done 2 now. We are actually coming to your cities, and you can sign up. There is a cost, unfortunately, to it. I wish I had the funds and sponsors to do it for free. But we have experts who are survivor, military personnel who are coming to train you, everyday Americans, on exactly what Patrick's talking about. We come to your community. We take 200 individuals in a class, and we teach you over the course of 2 days on how you need to do and what you need to do to prepare for the coming storm. So if you're interested in that, we'll be posting that on our website so you can get more information about how you can sign up to protect your family. The other thing that we've developed with our security personnel and our security team is what you need in your bug out bag, what you need to survive 3 days, 1 week, 2 weeks, 30 days. Because there's a lot of stuff out there, Patrick, as you know, that's just a bunch of fluff you don't need to purchase. We're going to show you what you actually need to have in these case scenarios. And then what I'd like to do, Patrick, is kind of shift a little bit, and we'll get back to the preparation, but talk about what happened with the SVB, the Silicon Valley Bank collapse, the other banking collapse, what Biden is doing and the Federal Reserve is doing, and not just from America's perspective, but let's look at it from a global perspective, because really Americans need to start having their lens a little bit wider, because we tend to look only at what's affecting us in our world, right? But we really need to understand this on a global scale and what they're doing and why they're doing it and what we need to do to give you the tools to combat this.
Okay, before I do that, can I hit one last point on the survival robust thing? If this sounds like a lot of work, there's a simple way to do it. You can go on some websites. Overstock used to have this, but they shut it down, where you can buy just like a backpack for $250 that comes loaded with 30 days of food for a family of 4 and all the basics, some basic first aid kits, some compass. You don't try to turn yourself into Rambo, but you can just, for $250, you can buy these prepackaged kits, and in one purchase, you get it, you put it in your closet, and you and your family of 4 are ready. If all you've got to do is shelter in place for 30 days, you could do it. So that's a really simple 5-minute way to take care of a big chunk of the problem.
I'm glad you brought that up. WFFA has a bug out bag that we've already prepared for you. You can go to Women Fighting for America's website, WFFA.win, and you can order your bug out bag from us directly. We've done the work for you.
Good. Well, the bigger picture of what's going on, let's go one bigger picture. Our banking system is based on, Thomas Jefferson, I think it was, that said, if this nation ever develops a central bank, then our someday Americans will wake up paupers in a land their forefathers conquered. That's what's happened. We've had a 110-year history since they passed the Federal Reserve. This all sounds real complicated. Think of it this way. Imagine there was an entity that had a very special privilege, that whenever the US government was running out of money, it could loan fake money to the government. It could loan monopoly money to the government. And the government, when it came time to pay it back, taxed you to pay them back with real money. That'd be a very special privilege. Wouldn't you agree? Wouldn't you like to have that? You could loan the government fake money and they're going to pay you back with real money from the citizens someday. That's a special privilege. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Well, now, please, that's what the Federal Reserve is. And understand, Federal Reserve is no more federal than Federal Express. There's a private corporation in our economy that has this extraordinary privilege. By law, it has a checking account with zero in it, and it writes checks on and nothing can bounce. And so that's where it makes money up, but we get taxed to pay it back with real money. It's insane. So all things like that come to Yogi Berra said something like, when something can't go on forever, it won't. We've had 110 years of money created that way. And then we have an economic theory called Keynesianism, which is that the government should spend to stimulate. And when somebody said to Keynes, well, at the end of the day, isn't that going to, and he said, well, in the long run, we're all dead. Well, the long run has showed up. It's 100 years later that it has shown up, and it's not so good. So we've got the fake debt-based money. We've got Keynesian magic multiplied spending. We've detached from gold in 1971. And it's just a 110-year-old magic money tree that is built up, and we're facing a crisis, I think, that is bigger than the Great Depression itself. There are ways to get through it. There's a way you can get through all this with an absolute minimization of human suffering. And I'll tell you what that is if you want to take 60 seconds.
Absolutely.
As you know, I'm friendly with a certain smart guy out in Omaha. Now, I know a lot of people listening don't like him. He's been kind of a rabbi to me all my life. And I was talking to him 20 years ago about this issue. And I said, the U.S. is being run financially like it's a bad insurance company that it's not being run on sound principles. And on someday it's all going to crash. And then I guess the rich are going to have to bail it all out. And he said, quick as a wink, he said, well, who's going to bail it out, Patrick? The poor? If the poor could bail it out, they wouldn't be the poor. They'd be the rich. And that's exactly right. There is a way to get through this. And, the rich, if somebody goes from being worth 10 billion to 7 billion, believe me, their quality of life doesn't suffer. You could get through this, but we could get through this as a country with a minimization of suffering to the vast majority of people. However, That's not what we're going to do, because Washington is so captured and Washington is the bitch of the elite, pardon me. It's not going to take that step. It's going to take another step, which is basically to create a Hunger Games world where there's a tiny elite that enjoys, caviar and champagne and filet mignon, and the rest of you are going to be eating the bugs until we die off and the population contracts substantially. So that's what they're about. That's what they have in mind. That's the plan.
Patrick,
And
that
our
is such
job
a
is-
great point. First, and Hollywood always gives a little bit of a vision of what the elites are doing because they can't help themselves, right? The globalists, the elites, they have to reveal their plans. We just don't realize it, or we're not looking. But two things, you've already seen where they're trying to put education in our school systems about bugs and how they're protein and that we need to start eating bugs. You've heard Bill Gates talk about it, another world elitist talk about the bugs. And then it was interesting, Chuck Schumer back, I think it was in December, sometime in December, I was listening to a press conference. I don't, like to watch it too often, but he said something that really piqued my interest. And he kind of revealed one of the reasons why the borders are open. He said, we're not reproducing, and he meant the whites, right? Us, we're not reproducing fast enough. And then
neither are blacks,
we need to,
actually.
pardon?
Neither are blacks. Blacks are not either. Their rate of reproduction
Right.
is
The
below
blacks
maintenance.
that we're not reproducing. And the other thing that interesting that he said is that we need to bring in a population that can do the lower income type work, right? That we don't want to do, which would be your field work, your housekeeping. And it reminded me reminiscent of the slave owners, because, that's what the Democratic Party were. They were the slave owners. And so it just reminded me of that. And you're so right. The elitists want to be the elite, and they want to usher in those, the poor people, to do their dirty work and serve them.
Yeah, I mean, it is the case that in a demographic decline, all kinds of things get upside down. Social Security and social safety net. When they started Social Security, there were 35 workers for every one retired person. So you can scrape a little bit away from each of those workers and support the retired person. We're getting closer and closer to 1-to-1. I don't know what the ratio is now, but I know that within a decade or so, we'll be at the point where you might as well, like a kid graduates from high school, they should give him his diploma and walk him over and introduce him to an old person and say, okay, this is now your personal old person. And from now on, as you work, we're going to take half of what you make and give it to them. It's just not sustainable. So that all of this can be redesigned and restructured in a way that, like I say, you could get through this with a minimization of injury to the poor, but they're not. They're not going to do that. Trump would if he were president. He'd be. It's everything is upside down in this Orwellian world. The leftists who hold themselves out as the champions of the poor are the ones who are throwing them under the bus with this move to the Hunger Games society. They care about themselves. So this could all be defeated. But it is the case. What Schumer's really about is they know that their ideas don't sell. They don't, they can't, that the Democratic Party will dwindle and die unless they can't win people with their ideas. So they have to drop the border and have new people come in who they think they can get to vote Democrat. I think that they might be in for a little bit of a surprise that day. I think there's a bunch of Latinos coming to this country illegally, and I don't support that. But a lot of them have had their taste of socialism, and maybe they're future Republican voters. Who knows? Anyway, so that's
Patrick,
what.
let me ask you a question. So, what is your take on Silicon Valley, the banking system, and what you think the Federal Reserve and this administration are doing with our banking system? What do we need to expect in the coming days?
They're doing the exact opposite of what they should be doing. What they should be doing is, what they are doing is they're ring fencing, just like they did this in 2008. They ring fenced 19 financial institutions at the heart of the financial system. And the United States Treasury said, we put the full faith and credit of the US Treasury under those 19 massive banks. And what they should do is say, we're going to ring fence that group. We're going to let them burn first. We'll put the full faith and credit of the US Treasury under the regionals and the community banks, the hundreds and hundreds of them. There's over 1,000. That's who they should support. And let the financial elites at the massive institutions, let them burn. However, since essentially Washington, D.C. has become a wholly owned subsidiary of Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and such, they're not going to do it that way. And what you see going on now, they're changing the rules of the game. They're not going to come out and say what I just said, but by saying that we are going to support this time they have ring fenced the 8 biggest banks, systemically important financial institutions, which is a term you should know. CFIs is how they refer to them. The systemically important financial institutions. They're ring fencing them, and they're saying we will, even though the FISLIC insurance, federal insurance, only covers up to $250,000 in the bank account. We're going to cover infinite deposits in the bank account as long as it's in one of those 8 institutions. Well, that makes it totally irrational for anyone with more than 250 grand in savings to keep their money in one of the regionals or community banks. So they've just reset the rules of the game. So all of this money is fleeing the regional and community bank. They're creating a run on the bank, but without, in a way, they've just changed the incentives that are making that happen. So
Patrick, for somebody who doesn't understand some of this terminology, so ring fencing, can you explain what that is? And then 2, would you say that then maybe we should put out a narrative to say, do not take your money out of the smaller community banks or the credit unions, because that will help to counter what they're doing? What is your thoughts on those 2 things?
Yes, if you have more than $250,000 in savings, just don't keep it in one community bank. If you've got $600,000 in savings, keep $250,000 in one bank, get another bank account at the competitor across the street, put $250,000, get a third one, put $100,000 in. All 3 will be insured by the federal government. You just can't have over $250,000 in one place unless it's in one of those 8 banks at the center. When I say ring fencing, I mean they're building a fence around it, and they're saying we're going to protect everything inside the fence. And so that kind of is making it sensible for everybody outside the fence to move their money into one of those 8 massive banks. And what they need to do is, instead, if your money's not in one of those massive banks and you don't want it to be, keep it in the regionals, keep it in the communities. You may have to get 2 or 3 different banks, bank accounts, 2 or 3 different banks, and split your money up. And so we'll all be insured. Well,
Patrick, let me ask you. So to counter that, how about if most people don't in America, unfortunately, they don't have $250,000. I mean, that's a smaller percentage of everybody, but there's power in the little, right? In numbers when we're all unified. So even if you had more than 250,000 or you have under that and you're a smaller kind of potato, how about if we instruct everybody to actually remove our money from these banks, these huge banks, these 12 banks that they've designated, and pull our money out of those banks to make them collapse and put them in the smaller banks like the credit unions, et cetera. So what do you think about that strategy?
Well, it's not just about individuals, it's about corporations. So even small town businesses, they have over 250,000. So really it's about they're trying to drive all the businesses in America to just move and bank with those 8 central banks.
Can you name those banks, Patrick? What are the bit? And I kind of tend to, like, for me, Bank of America and all of them, they're horrible banks. They're evil. They're funding the demise of America.
I used to be
Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo. A decade ago, I could have named all these off the top of my head. I haven't been paying attention anymore to know who's what.
HSBC, I think, is another one. Isn't that China owned?
Well, Hong Kong Shanghai Bank. I don't want to say, and I used to be able to rattle them off. I know the big Wall Street players anymore, but things have shifted around. JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America. But the other side of this is they're going to use that once. I think that by June, they're going to be introducing the central bank digital currency. And so they're going to try to get all the money to flood into these 8 banks. And then those 8 banks are going to say, okay, if you have $100,000 with us, accept it, but you will let us switch it into a digital, into a something that's just like the US dollar, but it's a blockchain basis like Bitcoin. It's like the government issued its own Bitcoin. And they're even going to say, look, if you got $100,000 and you'll let us switch into these digital ones, we'll give you $105,000. They'll create incentives that get people to move. And now it's kind of funny. I've got 2 hearts beating in one breast about this. As I said last night, I invented this. If you look up my name, Google my name and Barbados and the word BIT, B-I-T-T, you'll see that 6 years ago, I invented that. I invented central bank digital currencies. Myself and a young guy named Gabriel Abed, we built the first ones in the world. We built the stuff that's now it's been introduced in Nigeria. We built it as a guarantee of liberty. The way we have it architected was it would be a guarantor of liberty. And I'll never forget that about 6-7 years ago, I was asked to speak at the United States Treasury on this subject. And I laid this out. Did I tell you this story last night?
No.
I laid all this out about what a digital central bank digital currency would look like, and told them we got to get this done before China is doing it, because there are real advantages to doing it. There are real advantages that I could explain to having this. And the way I had it architected, you don't need these banks. It was a way to sort of, the current banking system as it's architected is designed for the rich to get richer and the poor not. And instead you could design this, it would be very egalitarian. And I remember telling them, we've got to get this done and architected. China was working on it. And I said, we got to get this architected, because if the Chinese version reaches the world first, then it's going to become authoritarian. I remember this woman at the Treasury. It was a big lunch, 100 people or more. And they said, what do you mean? I said, well, what China is going to do is say, okay, the central bank, each of you have your account at the central bank. And, your money counts today, and your money counts, and your money counts. But you said something nice about the Dalai Lama, so your money doesn't count anymore. So we have to prevent that from happening, we have to have our own system built. And I'll never forget, they looked at me funny because I'd used that line a couple other places and gotten a laugh. And I remember some people looking, and I thought, I didn't get the laugh that I thought. And I've always wondered, looking back, I hope I didn't give them the wrong idea. It was almost like I thought, wait a second, did they take from that, gee, that would be a good idea, let's build our version of that first. I wasn't attuned to worrying about the United States government had to be kept from being oppressive. But now that we've seen what happened with the Canadian truckers, we know that we're one border away from a government that will do that will say, hey, we don't like you, you're saying politically disfavored speech, so your money, your bank account doesn't count anymore. And
aren't they already doing that, Patrick? Because I believe our government's already doing that. I mean, look at the weaponization of all of our agencies, including the IRS. And again, when I was at the United Nations and we were looking at their plan, their 2023 agenda for counterterrorism, all of this stuff was embedded into their international laws that they were trying to pass in June. And part of that is exactly what you're talking about. So if you belong to a certain ideology that doesn't fit in with their worldview, even within our own government, they are going to try to pull and take control over all of aspects of your life, whether it's your health, whether it's your finances, whether the ability to travel. There's a patent that just was filed in January of this year that scares the bejesus out of me, which we're going to be posting on our website. And every American should really be fearful of what their plans are.
What's that patent say?
I'm going to send it to you. I started delving into it. We pulled it a couple nights ago. So me and my team are really digesting it, but ultimately it has to do with your passport. And if you don't fit into certain things, whether it's if the WHO, and the WHO is actually mentioned in this patent, that when something is, if the WHO says that there's a pandemic or whatever, like you were talking about earlier, they will be able to shut you down and you won't be able to leave your home. They're going to track you, so to speak, through this passport, international passport. I'll get that over to you, Patrick, so you can look at it. But this is what's coming right now.
There's another step you can take to defeat this is to get stuff in gold and silver. Have money in gold and silver. Once you have it in gold and silver, silver's wonderful, gold's wonderful. It's gone up 5% today. It's going to go a heck of a lot more. Money that you make gold and silver stays anonymous. So I would, there'll always be, I do want to tell people that one of the things they freak out about central bank digital currencies is that it's not anonymous. Well, pardon me, but wake up, sunshine. 97% of your transactions, of Americans' transactions, are not anonymous. They can, if it's going through a credit card or a savings or a checking or anything, believe me, they can look at it. So 97% of your transactions aren't anonymous anyway. So the whole central bank digital currency thing, from the point of view of lacking anonymity, that can be solved by just making gold and silver legal tender. So if you want to keep anonymous, now, you can't be paying with a check. You can't be paying with a credit card. You should be using physical cash. Well, you could just switch to using silver coins and do the same thing. But so you can preserve anonymity that way. And they can't cancel you if you have it in gold and silver. What scares me now about central bank digital currencies for the U.S. is I no longer have the faith in our government that they won't use it to impose authoritarianism.
Exactly.
So, now we can do it if 45 gets back in power. There's a way to do central bank digital currencies that bring all the benefits and don't have these drawbacks, but we can't possibly do it under this set of goons. They're going to do just what I was warning them that China was going to do in 2015 or 2016. I sat in this lunch telling them, we got to let me get this done because otherwise China's going to get it done first. And that, and you know what happened in 2019? I was 2 years ahead of China in building all of this. The SEC opened an investigation on me. Did I tell you about this?
No, you did not, but isn't that what they do?
Well, guess who did it? A woman named Melissa Hodgman. That name ring a bell to you?
Yes, it does.
Peter Strzok's wife. Peter Strzok's wife at the SEC opened an investigation on me into some matters that I can't go into in any detail here, but the matters were very much tied up with the other stuff that I was doing at the request of, or where the forbearance of Uncle Sam wanted certain things done, so we beat China. And Melissa Hodges or whatever, Peter Strzok's wife opened an investigation into me for stuff I was doing on behalf of other people who wanted stuff done. Is that the funniest thing you ever heard?
Well, that's what they do. They go after that. But there's two things really quick. Raj, if you can put up, it's a United States patent and it's called the digital passport with verified data provenance. So it's digital passport with verified data provenance. It is patent number 11,553,311. B as in Bravo, number 2. It was pulled on January 10th, 2023. So it's very interesting. And the applicant was none other than, you guys ready for this? Bank of America.
Give me that number again, Christie.
11,553,311. B as in Bravo, 2. I'm under the, I'm kind of like old school. I believe that we need to go back to the gold standard. I believe that when we switched off of that, I don't want to get into that today, but from a constitutional, we needed to go back to the gold standard. I'm kind of anti any kind of digital currency because unfortunately, when you have anything digital, they can control your lives. They can lock you down, shut you out. Men's heart are corrupt. But when you have physical silver and gold and you can barter and trade with that is really, really important. Decentralize and allow for independent crypto, or that might be a way to go, precious metals. And by the way, everybody on here, we're going to give you a list of approved places that we know are legitimate good places to get your gold, silver, etc.
And yeah, so there's a difference between saying that our national currency should be gold based versus you could still have US dollars in use, digital or paper, but we can also use, I think in 9 states, they have legalized gold and silver as legal tender. So that's one step. It'd be great if we could get them all the way to having the base. There already is a digital gold. It's called Bitcoin. If there's a third place to put some money, it would be Bitcoin. Because that's but I know that's a little technical for people and to get into. I think that the reason they don't want, it's so clear to me now, this battle over money is all a battle over authoritarianism and against liberty. They want a form of money that some government mandarin sitting in an office can sign a piece of paper and create more of it. And that's what central banks are. And that's why you want things based on gold or silver, because it doesn't matter how powerful he is. Joe Biden cannot sit in an office and sign a piece of paper and create a new ton of gold. It's a physical thing. And but that's a lot to fight for. But in a perfect world, I'll tell you what the better mousetrap is. And I told the United States Treasury that this is what was going to happen. Russia and China are going to introduce a digital currency that's backed by gold. And they are secretly accumulating much more gold than they're acknowledging. The official numbers are that the US has 8,000 tons of gold in reserves, and China and Russia have like 3,000 and 2,000. I think that secretly China has been accumulating gold for 20 or 30 years. I think they're going to come out someday and announce they've got 20,000 tons of gold. They have far more gold than the US does. If they do that, and then they were introduce a digital currency based on it that was directly convertible back and forth into gold, that's a better mousetrap. And that will instantly collapse the United States dollar as the global reserve currency. It would be foolish for anyone. So that's how they're going to do it.
That's a really great point. So I can tell you my sources, both in Central South America and also in Africa. I can tell you right now that you are spot on that assessment, that China and Russia both have been buying up serious amounts of gold in those particular countries. A lot of it has also been gold that is not really tracked, so to speak, as well. And this is very concerning, and I think you are spot on that.
It breaks my heart because we could have done it. Listen, the United States they're stockpiling gold that they're not acknowledging is the issue. I think that at least China has far more than they have acknowledged. This is what kills me. We're attached to the US dollar as the global reserve currency. What people don't tell you is that is just another decision that favors the rich over the poor. We used to manufacture products in America. In fact, American workers are still the most productive per hour. But because they have kept since I was in college, they have kept the value of US dollar at 2 or 3 times what it would otherwise be because of the petrodollar system and because it's the global reserve currency. What that does is it's bad for manufacturers. It's bad for lower margin businesses because it makes your products much more expensive to the world. But if you're in a business where you have 100% margins, i.e. the financial industry, and you're in the business of creating dollars, then it's very good for you. So that policy decision, we're all tied to the US being the global reserve currency, like we're rooting on the Redskins and we want the Redskins jerseys to be the most valuable. Don't think of it that way. If the US dollar fell in half, our economy would be on puree. Our cars would be the most inexpensive in the world. Everything we manufactured would be the best deal for the rest of the world. They'd be buying everything here because, it would be the greatest boon to our manufacturing economy. It wouldn't be so good for the bankers because the bankers are in the business of those dollars so it really is just another way that the US policy hasn't been there to benefit the whole nation. It's been to benefit a small elite that basically, like I say, they've got Washington under their thumb, and that's why they drive decisions like this.
Patrick, what I'd like to do is spend about another 8 minutes talking about this. And then what I'd like to do is bring in questions. So everybody out there right now who are watching this live, I want you to start formulating your questions. We're going to bring those questions in and we are going to answer the hard, tough questions. So please start thinking about your questions. You're going to want to type them in the chat line and my team will be reading them to Patrick and you will get answers right here on how to protect and defend your family, your community, and for the storm that's coming. Patrick, let me ask you, so with the Federal Reserve's moves, because we've seen this, you know, in 2008, what Obama did, and you know, this is just another Obama administration from the basement, in my opinion. But what happened last week, and why is this happening? I mean, then you look at Switzerland, right, and what happened in Switzerland with their banking. So, what is your take on this? What do you think the next steps the Federal Reserve is going to do, and are we going to see more collapses?
Yes, everything's going to collapse and keep getting swept into the center until you just have these 8 that the government supports. That's really their plan. Switzerland is always been thought of as the most prudent and stable. I love Switzerland and the way they manage their economy and such, but even they bought into they've bought into the magic money tree theory of the world. So I think that what you're seeing in Switzerland and the US is just, it's a rot is in the system and it's just going to keep on bubbling up. And as it bubbles up and breaks banks, they're just going to keep sweeping it all. So you end up with these 8 Leviathans in the center. And yeah, it's just beginning. This is all just beginning. What they're going to do is, though, in a controlled way, ideally, they will do it over 2 months, 3 months, 4 months. So it doesn't, you know, it gives time for people to move the money. You will just see this going on for 3 or 4 months. They're not going to be able to stabilize this, I think.
So what do you think the average American, you know, I get questions all the time, Patrick, you know, unfortunately right now, because of this administration's and their policies, purposeful policies to destroy the middleman and the lower income families. A lot of people don't have a lot of money. They live paycheck to paycheck right now, Patrick. What practical things can those individuals do? Because they are very scared and they don't know what to do. They don't know where to move their money. For example, if somebody has, and you look at the stock market right now, right? And it's so volatile, it's fluctuating, and somebody's had some losses. What can they do? Would you recommend them pulling out and trying to invest most of that into silver and gold right now? What would your thought? And by the way, we're not giving advice. Whatever you decide to do, that's on you. But we're trying to give you some information that might be helpful.
Yeah, I can't give advice. I can tell you what I'm doing. I can tell you that as of 3 years ago, I don't have a single stock. Everything I have is gold, silver, or Bitcoin. I now do have one publicly traded stock. It's Rumble. That's because I financed locals. Locals got bought by Rumble, so I ended up with some publicly traded stock. Other than that, I've got nothing in the stock market. And you also don't want to keep things in a safe deposit at the bank. When FDR closed the banking system, they closed. You can't get to your lockbox at the bank. There's other companies like Brinks. Believe it or not, the Brinks truck you see driving around, every city has a Brinks, and they have private lock boxes, and you can store stuff there. And there's other companies like that. You should get your as much. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you that what I did is I've got all of my savings I could into 3 years ago into Bitcoin and gold and silver.
So I have a first question.
Last thing. You want to plant a garden. You want to plant a garden. Or people have no idea. I was always the family gardener as a kid. People have no idea how much food comes out of the ground. It's funny how people get shocked when they first do it. You can take an area as big as this room in my hotel room in Milan, and you'd be shocked how much food comes out of this much earth. If you plant it, it's also kind of a nice skill to have, nice thing to do with your kids. My dad taught me to do it. And if you don't have a garden, in World War II, they called them victory gardens. If you don't have a victory garden going, you're really setting yourself up. Another thing about the victory gardens is it doesn't matter if the fuel runs out. It doesn't matter if the trucks stop rolling. You've got your victory garden.
Patrick, that's a really great segment to this, because you know what? We believe that you need to also partner with farmers in your local area. And there's usually some kind of farmer within a certain amount of radius, a couple hour radius of where you are, even if you're in the bigger city. And if you go and introduce yourselves to them and you partner with them and say, hey, if this happens, can we directly buy from you? Or if you're living in a city and you have an apartment or a condo, all you need is a little bit of sunlight, or you can even make artificial sunlight, and you can start doing hydroponics. There's a lot of ways that you can grow your own fruits and vegetables. I have lime trees and lemon trees. I was like you, Patrick. My daddy's from Kentucky. I was raised, fortunately, with growing our own food in our backyard. So that is such a key point. Grow your own food. Please do this, and you can start immediately. Just go to the Lowe's or Home Depot and get some plants. Make sure that you have seeds also that are seeds that can be, because right now I think they've done a lot of manufacturing with seeds where they don't reproduce. So make sure you're getting the proper seeds as well. And I think you can get those online. I'm going to go to a first question. Somebody we probably both know. Sharona Bishop is asking this of you, Patrick. Do you see this being a good thing afterwards with the banking situation and with the collapse? And then if we are being asked not to protest, by the way, what are we supposed to do on a local level?
Well, if you do protest, absolutely be committed to peace. First of all, peace, peace, peace. I got to tell you, so I'm not any friend of Uncle Sam anymore, but on occasion I've had reasons that we've had to interact. And a year ago, I was told by people in government that they were shocked that there had been no violence, and that they agreed with me that they think the plan had been to get us to be violent so that they could use instruments of government to oppress us and such. We screwed up their plan, and they told me this. I mean, good guys in the government told me that we screwed up the plan by being peaceful. The one thing they did never expect is that we were going to be this peaceful this long. It really screws up their plan. So if you do go protest, be committed to peace, and be aware there's going to be a bunch of ray-ups there trying to get it to be something else. If you fall for it, you fell for it once on J6, don't fall for it again. I don't mean to be critical, but don't ever fall for it again. Secondly, maybe what we need is some kind of visible symbol. I guess it's just the flag. We need to show our numbers, that we have the numbers. Everyone's on our side. Even in government, people are on our side overwhelmingly. This is a thing people should know. Government is really having a civil war in the top executive level. The people, they have lost, even among their own people across the agencies. Those people don't want to go through a communist revolution. So even within the top layer, there's people on our side. I'll tell you something. Attorney General Merrick Garland had a meeting, I guess it was maybe 3 or 4 months ago now, where he had 10 people in the room, his most trusted 10 people. And he said some stuff about a Hillary Clinton lawsuit and that investigation that America Project has something to do with. And he told these 10 people, like, why hasn't this been buried? This can take us all down. 2 different people in the top 10 got me that information. So in Merrick Garland's top 10 trusted people, there's at least 2 people on our side. So they are. And what happens if once authority splits, people start thinking for themselves. And let me tell you, federal authority is split, and these federal people are thinking for themselves. Did you ever hear, I gave a talk a couple times where I talked about this thing called the Milgram experiment, where they had people come in and they told them they had to shock somebody else. Did you ever hear that story?
I think I vaguely did, but most people probably haven't who was on here.
Well, it was an experiment done in the 60s in Yale, where a psychologist had this experiment. People would come in and there'd be another guy there. They'd flip a coin and, okay, you're the teacher or the student, and you're going to sit at this panel with 45 buttons on it, and the other guy's going to sit in the other room, and you read him a list of his words. He's got to recite them back. And if he gets them wrong, you give him a shock, and then the shock gets bigger and bigger. It was all fake. It was all, the guy was actually an actor. but it was really to see how far you could just get a man in the street to follow orders. Would they be willing to shock? How far would they go? Well, it turns out that 2/3 of people are willing to shock a stranger to death. All the guy in the white coat has to do is say, everybody tries to stop. Everybody says, oh, I hear him screaming. I don't want to shock him anymore. No one's a sadist that bad. But what the doctor would do would just say, the guy running the experiment would say, like, you must continue. You don't have any choice but to continue. Science demands that you continue. I take all responsibility. Go ahead. And there were 4 prods. And if they used all 4 on you and you still wouldn't go on, then they would stop pressuring you and they would explain it was all a charade. Well, it turns out 2/3 of the people with just these 4 simple prods would go all the way. And this is what's fascinating, that he ran the experiment with different versions of it. What if the guy's not in the next room? What if he's closer to me so I can see him being shocked? What if I've actually got to hold his hand on a plate and make him? All these different things affected how much but it turns out people are overwhelmingly more obedient than they should be, with one exception. It's when you have 2 guys with white coats in the room, two guys running the experiment. And when the first one tells me, when I try to say, hey, I don't want to shock this guy too badly, he's screaming. And the one guy says, oh, you must go on. I take all responsibility, or science demands that you continue, Patrick. If the other experimenter says, oh, wait, I'm not so sure, maybe he shouldn't. As soon as authority gets split, people immediately start thinking for themselves and wake up and say, this is crazy. I'm not going to shock this guy to death. Screw you. It's when
you saw that with the COVID, right? That was about compliance and control. So they did. And actually, Patrick, that documentary is out right now, because I was on an airplane the other day flying back, and I actually was scrolling through my Netflix or something. So they actually have that documentary that you can look up if anybody's interested in doing that. So I want to switch gears a little bit here.
Let me just drive home that point. The federal government the authorities are now split about what's going on, and the federal people are seeing it and they're thinking for themselves. There's a lot of them that aren't going along with this. Authority at the highest levels of the federal government are now split on this kind of stuff. So that's really good, because the federal employees are waking up and thinking for themselves and saying, we're not going to go along with this. A lot of them are.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of frustration out there with we the people. We're wondering when justice is actually going to happen, when some of these individuals are going to start being held accountable on all levels for the crimes against the Constitution and the people of the United States. So I'm looking forward to God revealing his hand and holding these individuals accountable. So I'm going to bring in Raj really quick. Raj, if you'd like to come on in, and if you could read some of the questions that are being asked so we can start this Q&A part of the program. Raj, your microphone's not on. We cannot hear you.
There you go. Thank you, Christy. So my friends, right before I do that, there is another action I want you to I know we're giving you a lot of actions to take, but this is the crux of this whole entire conversation we're having today. And here's what I want you to do. I would like very much for you to consider that our content is being shadow banned everywhere. And because it's being shadow banned everywhere, we are literally in a situation where we need you. I'm going to try and put this on main view here. We need you to actually show up with 3 actions. 1, we want you to please take advantage of the fact that we are now on multiple channels. So if you're on any of the legacy channels, Facebook, Instagram, any of those channels there, we need you please to do 2 things. 1, find WFFA Christie Hutcherson on Rumble, on MeWe, on Locals, and subscribe there. That's number 1. Number 2, please share that message with your friends. Literally, we are trying to inform people of this kind of content, and these legacy social media channels are shutting the message down. So if you don't like what they're doing, and I know you don't, take an action. Very simple. Find Christie Hutcherson, WFFA, Women Fighting for America. Find them on these other channels like Rumble, I'm just putting everyone like Rumble, MeWe, Gab, Locals. And while you're doing that, make sure you also connect with Patrick Byrne. He puts all kinds of information on his local channel. You got to connect with them. And I'm just going to say, they didn't ask me to do it. Subscribe subscribe. These two folks, Christie and Patrick, have put their own, at their own expense, fought for the interests that you and I have. It's time for us to join them. And if a bunch of us can do a little bit, it significantly accelerates what they are able to do. So with that said, let's go to the next question. And so I'm just going to go to this one here that just came in over here. For people that are renting, Patrick, there are so many people, especially with, I can talk about Florida, real estate is so expensive here, housing is so expensive, and many people in inner cities also may not be, or big cities may not have the luxury of planting a garden. What can those folks do to be a little bit more resilient if they don't have a backyard that they can leverage?
Well, actually, there's a lot of things you can grow indoors. You can grow, I mean, you can buy these kits where you hang up trellises and stuff, and there are things that grow indoors. You want to get the cheapest way to provide the calories is get beans and rice. Get beans and rice, and if you eat meat, get some pork. Those three things go together, and you get, but even just beans and rice, is very in it. You buy big sack of beans, big sack of rice. Yeah, it gets boring, but you can actually, for a small amount of money, a couple $100, you can buy an immense amount of food for your calories for your family that way, especially if you're willing to mix in some, even just a little bit of pork. And it has to do with, you probably know all this, the amino acids, the complete amino acids, all this stuff. So
I think spam lasts for a very long time.
Say again?
I think spam lasts for a very long time.
Well, you got to draw the line somewhere. But no, beans and rice are a complete food that you can actually live off. Those two things. Get a couple sacks of those. It's not expensive, and you can keep your family alive on. But a very good point is getting associated with. There are local farms. There are. Something we built at Overstock is probably another one of the things they unplugged when I left. Was a system where we had hundreds of local farms around the country signed up, and you could come if you lived in Okalala or something. Wherever you lived, you could enter your zip code. It would tell you, okay, here's a local farm within 10 miles. Then you buy a share and you pay them up front, and then as they grow over the season, once a week you get a bag of groceries delivered to your home, or you got to drive to their farm, and it's all, but you pay them up front. That's a very good system to get involved in. If you can find that sort of local co-op farming is one way you can beat that. I know people who live in New York City, but they do that with farms that are outside of New York City. Obviously, they make those deals, and they have a weekly supply of the fresh vegetables they need.
So there are things you can do. The message that you can hear here from both Patrick and Christie is start now, prepare now. You may not see an imminent need when you go to the grocery stores. You may see a few shelves, but you're like, well, there's nothing needed to panic. No, my friends, don't panic, but take action now. And when Patrick talked about what you can do in your local area there, Christie Hutcherson is actually going to be on Brighteon. And the reason to bring that up is Health Ranger Report. You guys all know Mike Adams, or you've heard him. He is another source of information like what Patrick just said. Get in touch with Health Ranger Report. You can watch him on his website, on Brighteon. Christie Hutcherson is also going to be on Brighteon coming up here on a weekly basis. So that's another resource that you should take advantage of. Another question, credit unions. A lot of people asking Patrick about credit unions. Are they a safer alternative? How should people think about credit unions? What's your comment?
They're just as vulnerable. It's a different federal agency insures them, but they are just as vulnerable. What you want to do, though, you can defeat that if you just split if your savings are less than $250,000, you don't have to worry about this. Because the federal government will insure that. If your savings are above that, you want to just split your savings up among multiple banks. Here's another important thing. If you haven't done it yet, if you have an adjustable rate mortgage, you need, well, again, legally, I can't give financial advice, but I can tell you, I think it would be nuts at this point to have, for me, any long-term debt that has an adjustable interest rate, because those interest rates are going to go up. We all know that inflation is obviously quite a bit above what they are officially reporting. Eventually, the interest rates have to go up to at least meet inflation, and well, in normal circumstances. So what I'm saying is interest rates are going to go up. You want to, if you have any debt that's floating, you want to lock it in now, I believe.
With regard to legislators, because a lot of people that are watching this that are grassroots members, they're members of different volunteer groups, is there anything that people can do with their legislators to help mitigate this nonsense and mismanagement and maladministration? What would your comment be on that? In fact, that would be for both Christie and Patrick, but Patrick, go first.
Well, having your state pass a law like 9 states have that say gold and silver are legal tender would be one step. I think that it's beyond. I think the legislatures are. I'm more interested in the constitutional sheriffs these days, but legislators who are, who are pushing back on federal overreach and fighting the states' rights fight. There's no reason the federal government should be reaching down and making the decisions it's making.
Yeah, and I would just echo before Christie comes on, my friends, no matter where you are in the country, in your state, no matter what color your state is, there are legislators that will work with you. You have to do the hard work of finding them. So don't be discouraged. If the first one doesn't play ball, go to the next one, go to the next one, go to the next one. Christie, all your work is really a function of getting people to take action locally, even with their legislators. How do people educate themselves on how to do that?
Well, first and foremost, you really truly need to understand how to truly vet a candidate first and foremost, because whether you're in the Republican Party, Democratic Party, Independent Party, or whatever the two-party system, there's a hierarchy, which is basically the next in line. And so a lot of these people are handpicked and groomed from a very long time to continue this insanity that you see in our deep state and our government. Even some of the good guys you think are the good guys are not the good guys. And so on our website, we kind of teach you what to look for and how to vet your candidates. But those who are still in office right now, again, what Patrick said, I mean, it is very difficult. And what you said, Raj, if you don't get the answer you want or need, they work for you. And I think that that's one of the things that we have to continually remind them. They are put there in office to do the will of the people, their constituents, not the will of themselves or their own personal agendas. They're a voice for the people. So you have to really continually engage with them. One email is equal to 1,000 emails. If you write a letter, that's really powerful. But you've got to show up, go and ask for appointments, bring a group of you with you and talk to them in groups. At the end of the day, when you show up in the bigger gathering, so to speak, or keep them accountable to some town hall meetings, that's going to keep their foot to the fire. But I'm kind of with Patrick. When you look at the last 30, 40, 50 years in the political realm, what politician, whether it's state or federal, has really done anything for the most part to further the protection and sovereignty of our republic? Not so much. So I think that you have to have a mind shift and start looking out elsewhere to how we, the people, can fortify our nation. One of those things is you need to get a hold of a book called The Constitution of the United States of America and the Bill of Rights. You need to understand and know your rights by the back of your hand. You should be able to recite them. And so then we can peacefully gather, we can peacefully push our government officials to do the will of the people.
This is so important. You've heard the verse, "My people perish for lack of understanding." And we're all watching Rumble, all watching Gateway, going to Gateway Pundit. We're all doing these things, showing up at rallies. How many of us have actually read the source document for all of this? So I'm encouraging you, if you haven't done that yet, read it. Take action when you're informed. If you're with your kids, if this was your kids, you'd be telling them to inform themselves on the material that they need to pass the tests that they're going to be coming up with. Patrick and all of us here are saying, do the same thing. Be informed. There's
a great book, really quick. There's a really good book out there. It's called The Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates. It's been out for a little bit now. It's a great book. It's a fantastic read. Everybody on this who's listening out there, you really should get a hold of that book, Doctrine of the Lesser Magistrates. Get it, read it, along with your Constitution. And again, partner with Patrick, Byrne, myself, Women Fighting for America. We give a lot of resources and a lot of educational material to come alongside of you, because this is a partnership, right? We, the people, in a unified way, can save our states, our republic, and eventually the United States. The reason why they are so hell-bent on this rhetoric to keep us divided, whether it's the racial division, all of these things, it's to divide us, because when we're divided, we can't be unified together. And that's what they're really ultimately, I believe that they're really afraid of. I believe that J6 really wasn't so much about President Trump. I believe it was so much about the fact that they were so scared when they saw the peaceful gathering of that many people coming together who believed in America, who believed in a freedom and liberty in our Constitution. It scared the bejesus out of them. So they were thinking, how can we scare you? The J6 committee, for example, and I know, Patrick, you and I are on a very prestigious list. I wear it with the badge of honor. But, that's what they're afraid of. They are afraid that if we get together and leaders, thought leaders like Patrick Byrne, myself, General Flynn, and others in this Patriot movement, we actually come together with a serious strategy to combat their movement, and then the people get behind us, that, my friend, is what they are afraid of, the elites of the world.
And that is exactly,
yeah, they're especially afraid. I'm sorry, Raj, go ahead, sir.
No, I was going to add, so as we look at the lack of response from our legislators, a function of that is we, the people, have been not doing the things that you just heard on this call. But now it's time for us to wake up and start taking those actions and holding our legislators accountable and partnering with them and urging them to lead in the right way. We've been silent and we got what we get. Back to you, Patrick.
Well, another group, and I'm not I know that this community doesn't really, they frequently remind me they don't see me as a sufficiently religious guy. That's okay. I'm telling you, joining a church, if it's the right church, that's a very natural way. You need to join as an individual. You're going to be powerless. In associations and civic societies where we get our power, get involved with a church. And if it's not, but remember, there's a lot of churches who are bought into this bad philosophy. Gosh, I come from the Catholic tradition, and what an intellectually defunct church that is now, with rare exceptions. They've bought into this whole social justice philosophy, which means they don't believe, there's so many things wrong with it. There are, look at so many of the Catholic churches don't stand for anything these days. I think this Pope is terrible, frankly.
So join
Patrick,
community.
you are so right. Most of the churches, and this is my philosophy about the churches. For me personally, I have a personal relationship with my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. I think when God, if you look at in scripture, what did he tell the disciples to do? He said, don't take your sandals, don't take your mat, but go to communities, find a home, take up residence there, and start preaching the good news of the gospel. And I think that's what we need and must get back to, and that is community. You don't have to go be in the four walls of the church, but you do need to get with like-minded individuals and set up, community churches in your own home, in your own communities, or go to a church and find a pastor that did not shut their church down during COVID. I'm here to tell you right now, if you're still in a church that is backing this woke agenda, Black Lives Matter, any of this stuff, you need to run, not walk, as far away from that congregation as possible and find like the Black Robe regiments. You can search Black Robe regiments. There's so many pastors out there who are bold, who are standing up and will lead you in the right way.
Yep. Black Robe Regiment, Bill Cook, anybody. I saw Pastor Jack Martin is on here saying, find those kinds of churches. Look, even if you don't believe, you want to be part of something, a bigger group of 500 people or something. They're not afraid. The elites are not afraid of you individually. They're afraid of groups of 500 people working together, things like that. I am working very hard to reach out to the Black community. People have to understand this is not black, white. This isn't versus non-Christians. It's not gays versus straights. This is about people who get what's going on, versus those who understand we are being driven in this psyop to fracture as a society. So, and in particular, the Black community is one we have to. I've spent 2 years in MAGA, and I've been delighted that I think I've seen one Confederate flag. And I've never heard anybody say the N-word or anything like that. I once asked at a group, does anyone here even know people who use those? And one guy at the table said, well, I know somebody up in Tallahassee who will use that word. We have to make sure there is no white identitarianism in our movement. We are receiving, this patriotism is not about, our whole tradition is an intellectual tradition that goes back to Jerusalem and Athens and Rome, but it isn't about white or Europe or anything like that. It's an intellectual tradition that comes up, through Holland and Britain and such to the U.S. Constitution. And it's a live and let live tradition. And these are the rules that we can adopt to have a society where people can maximize their own individual sense of the good. So we have to bend over backwards to make sure, in particular, the Black community feels welcome and home and friendly with us. And fortunately, I kind of view the Black, so I had cancer 3 times in my 20s. And every time I had cancer, when I'd get out of the hospital, I'd go and I'd take a bicycle trip across the country. I'd ride from one ocean to the other. And so I saw at 10 miles an hour and the Black community, the Black church going community, I feel is kind of a character capital of America and people need to make sure that everyone understands we're on the same side in this, that this is I think what the other side wants to do is they're engineering a global food crisis. I think they're trying to bring it to the U.S. shore. They're at least trying to make it so the U.S. isn't a big exporter. They're destroying our supply chain, and they want to get us at each other's throats, and they think it's going to split along racial lines. And then once it splits along racial lines, you're going to have the UN, the blue helmets showing up to stop this American race war. And they're all getting prepared for something like that. And then once the blue helmets are in here, it's over, because the blue helmets are a subsidiary of China too. And so we have to really bend over backwards to make sure that people understand this has nothing to do with white. It's great if you're a Christian, but it's not Christians versus non-Christians. We are a welcoming community for everybody who gets the situation we're in and wants to be on our side and doesn't want to throw away the Constitution.
At the end of the day, we were all created in the image of God. Doesn't matter the color of your skin. And we are all brothers and sisters, literally blood brothers and sisters in this together. And I know for myself, I love, one of the favorite things I did when I started this, God had me going to churches during the COVID lockdowns because he's got such a great sense of humor. And I really enjoyed going into the ethnic communities and speaking there. And they were the loving and kind and quite frankly, very patriotic and loving this nation against abortion, against all of this evil that's taken place. So you're right, Patrick. We need to be all encompassing. We need to bring in everybody. It's not my place to judge. We're all sinners this side of heaven, but we need to stand firm on the Constitution, and we need to stand firm on our Judeo-Christian foundation. With that being said, we're winding this down. It is out now noon. This went by so fast. And I think, Patrick, we're going to have you back on, because we have gotten so many questions and so many people telling me they're so excited. They can't wait to replay and share that this has been an incredible hour and a half. And I know your time's very, very valuable. So I'm going to turn it over to Raj. We have a couple announcements that we do want to make. Patrick, are you going to be speaking at Trump Doral with the Reawaken America tour alongside of myself and many other patriots coming up in, I think it's May, isn't it?
Yes.
Perfect. So anybody out there, if you want to meet me or Patrick, I might twist his arm and see if he wants to have like a little fun session of him and I together. And we will be more than happy to say hi to you guys, give you practical things. I'm here to announce something very exciting, and I really prayed about this. Bridie on TV contacted me, and they asked me if I wanted to do my own show. And as you guys know, I'm kind of a boots on the ground kind of girl. I don't like to sit still for very long, because where the real news is in the field, right? It's in the battlefield, and that's where I prefer to be. And so I agreed to do this as long as they didn't mind when I'm out in the field. So it's called On the Front Lines with Christie Hutcherson, and we're going to bring you truth all around the country and the world. and show you from a global perspective what's going on. My show is going to be a little bit different because we're going to have a 30,000 view lens on everything that's impacting our world and ultimately your families here at home in America. And then we're going to give you every single week true action, because I'm not just a girl of words. I think the time to keep talking and talking heads is over. We need to educate you and activate you on specifics of what you need to do to prepare your family and ultimately be the shield, be the beacon of light and hope for the rest of the world and save this republic we call America. The other thing is we need you to please, please, please move off of Facebook. Facebook has massively shadow banned me. I have over 80,000 plus followers just on Facebook alone. I need you 80,000 plus to get off of Facebook. I need you to go to Rumble. I need you to go to Locals. If you go to our website, WFFA, Whiskey Foxtrot Alpha.win, you will be able to click on the little links and follow us. Please do so. Share it with everybody else. And another thing is, I cannot continue to be out here on the front lines. Like Raj said earlier, I pretty much put my own personal finances just like Patrick does, and I am not a wealthy individual. I do it because I love my nation and I love my country. And the legacy, like Patrick, is what we did here and what we're going to be judged for when we go to our eternal home. I would rather be the poorest person in the graveyard than the richest person still here on earth, and know that I did nothing to impact the future generations, my children and children's children. So you've got to get involved. Time, talents, treasures. Please text the word fight. It's that little scroll down there, 91776. Believe it or not, $1 donation goes a long way. I take no salary. I am a $0 founder and CEO. 100% of your money goes to the fight to bring you guys truth and to educate you and activate you. I'm not a C3. I don't want to play the game with the IRS. So we do have a way. Just recently, Tom Rentz, if you don't know who Tom Rentz is, you need to know who he is. He's an incredible patriot fighting for this nation from a legal perspective. He is going to allow a portion of Women Fighting for America's money to take that C3 money. So if you have to absolutely have that little check in the box to get your tax write-off for bigger donors, he's going to facilitate that money and from a legal perspective and take care of all that for Women Fighting for America. So that will be rolling out on Wednesday of next week. But if you could please partner with us, I really desperately need funding right now. We are working on some serious projects, and that money needs to go towards that. One of those projects is called Operation Schoolyard. I just got back from being in the field, and we literally are uncovering what the cartel are doing right now in your back door with your children and recruiting them for their evil. And it's happening all over this country, and we need the money to expose that, among other things. So please get involved, join the fight, partner with us. Go to Rumble. Raj, I'm going to turn it over to you now. And Patrick, we'll bring you back on for last words. And thank you guys so much. As always, I love you guys. I love this country. Patrick loves you guys. He's not out there fighting. Raj with Defend the Nation and Defend Florida. We literally sacrifice thousands of hours away from our family, our friends. I know I would like to be on a beach somewhere with a pina colada in my hand, but unfortunately, we have chosen to do the hard work and give you the tools that you need to combat, to save this country, because we understand the storm is here and it's now.
Thank you, Christie. This is a action-packed session. I'm going to give you 3 more actions that you need to take. And this entire broadcast is all about the actions. Number 1, I see a lot of questions. Where do we buy gold? How do I store it? How much to get? Please go to Brighteon, the new place where Christie's program will be. Look at Health Ranger, and so many of your questions will be answered there. What type of sat phone? That's number 1. Number 2, I want to echo what Christie just said. Please connect with Christie Hutcherson on other channels, including Locals. You can also find Patrick Byrne on Locals. He produces this kind of strategic content on Locals. So that's something else you have to do. Now, my friends, it's not enough that you do those things. I am asking you not to be a hearer, but a doer only. What does that mean? Share this with other people. You are the ones that are going to turn this on. Share this with other people. So many of your questions were not answered. I totally get it. That is why Christie is putting the time into making a weekly program. But in order to get access to the weekly program, the link and all that, you've got to text the word fight to 91776. Very easy to do that, or go to WFFA.win. Patrick, please go ahead and close us off with your closing comments.
Closing comments, I'll give you one more specific and one more big. The specific is, if you're concerned about your communications, you should know that all the different apps you can get, Signal, WhatsApp, they all have some intelligence service behind them. So it's kind of a pick your poison thing. Threema has German intelligence. Signal has the United States agency. WhatsApp is Facebook, which is FBI. You want Bright Chat. Bright Chat is the same people who do Epoch TV, Epoch Times. They're Chinese people, Falun Gong, who've been dodging the CCP for 23 years. Their servers are in Switzerland. If you are concerned about secure communications, download Bright Chat. Next, the big thing going on here, the deep structure is this. I'll give it to you in 60 seconds. Think of it like we're fighting an organization that's trying to destroy the United States. The vice presidents of the organization are the 4 Mexican cartels. Some of them are worse than others, incidentally. I have to say, Gulf Cartel recently did something that I've always thought that they were, anyway, they're old school gangsters as opposed to the new school Zeta guys. Anyway, the 4 cartels are the vice presidents. They report to a senior vice president. That senior vice president is the Venezuelan cartel. It's the cartel of the stars, the cartel of this, because the stars are the stars on the shoulders of the capos of the cartel. Venezuela is where mafia and cartel turns into nation state. Then the president is Cuba, the CEO is Iran, and the chairman of the board behind the whole thing pulling strings is China. In China, they have already issued a deed for every home in America. If you've got a nice home, there's some Chinese colonel who's got the deed to your home. And he thinks that when all this falls and we have 3 years of civil war, and there's a speech by a retiring Minister of Defense of China named Chi Haotian, CHI space HAOTIAN, that described in 2003 what they're going to do. They're going to use a bioweapon to collapse us, get us all into a fight. 90% of us die in the Civil War, and it's not from the bullets. It's from the collapse of food and pharmaceutical supply chain. You want to, and then the cartels are given 3 years, and the blue helmets to just rape, pillage, burn, loot, turn us into a carcass, and then the Chinese show up and they colonize. They leave 30 million of us alive as slaves, whites. They're going to kill everybody else. And they want to have that. So this is all in the speech, that speech and unrestricted warfare and 100-year marathon. Ultimately, behind the scenes, this is a big play being put on by China. It's called movement warfare. It's not going to be like Red Dawn where they show up with bombers. They are manipulating our political scene and our movements to get us to crack that way. And then we take care of ourselves as far as they're concerned for our country. We collapse and 90% of us die over the course of a year. So if you want to prevent that from happening, and this is their words. This is the highest level leak that ever came out of Chinese history, is the speech of Chi Haotian. Is you got to understand this and understand that's what you're up against. And when you buy into the divisiveness, you're buying into their plan. This is about waking Americans up to understand we're all on the same side. We're on the same side here, and not to let them turn us against each other.
Patrick, that is the perfect segment into next week's. We're going to be breaking down that very thing that you just said. It's going to be about bioterrorism, the cartels, the world leaders, and how this China and Iran and Venezuela all play. I don't know if you saw 2 weeks before Christmas, Patrick, me and my team broke a massive story that you're not hearing anywhere on the news. As a matter of fact, it's being covered up. Even the state legislators and senators, who are some of my friends, had no idea that we uncovered the biggest sophisticated tunnel ever found on our U.S. soil. This tunnel, Patrick, is 4 football fields long. It originates in a warehouse in Mexico, goes underneath a very heavily trafficked Border Patrol area gate, and comes up, goes across the street, goes into a residential community, takes a left-hand turn, and comes up in a home. It has fortified walls, ceilings, fiber optics, rail systems, ventilation, air conditioning, you name it. But what was interesting is I broke the story, and when I saw something like this, and we also discovered another tunnel very similar to this, 3.5 hours to the south. And what was interesting is I started pulling flight patterns and cargo ship patterns into Central and South America within the last 6 months of me discovering this. And then I looked at what Biden did with Venezuela's president, and that was the strategic oil, right? We're going to a rogue communist nation who is funded by no other than Iran. And so, Patrick, there was a flight, Air Sfar Kashim airline, which is a U.S. sanctioned airline, took off from Tehran in June of this last summer. And on that airline supposedly was supposed to be auto parts. Well, that plane stopped in Cuba, lifted off from Cuba, went to Mexico City, and then from Mexico picked up passengers, by the way, along the way. Then it landed in Caracas, Venezuela, picked up 14 more passengers, landed in Buenos Aires, Argentina. And the only reason why we know what's on that plane is because one brave individual who was opposed to the president and vice president of Argentina, he's an opposition politician. He had that plane seized. He was in intelligence. That plane was carrying highly, highly sophisticated cyber intelligence. 14 of those individuals were Venezuelan and cyber intelligence operatives. And the person flying the plane was one of the board members of that airline and also a known high-ranking official within the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. So we started delving in a little bit deeper with some of my contacts and going into Central America, Patrick. And I broke this story. They met in Mexico with some of the leaders of the cartel. Sinaloa is one of them. And we have discovered training camps where Iranian National Revolutionary Guard are currently right now in several camps set up training militarily with several different entities, including Iran.
In southern
Venezuela. You're not hearing this anywhere else on any news organization.
Yeah, southern Venezuela has been turned into basically a training camp of narco terrorists. I was in Venezuela 4 or 5 years ago. You can actually find a picture of me on their official Instagram account from March 5th, 2018. And it's not, I didn't see anything there that I want to come here. But it's the southern Venezuela has been turned into basically a training area to stage the revolution. And they're taking people, thousands of people, and feeding them into this pipeline of refugees coming to us.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that next week. We're going to go in really deep dive. We're going to have a couple generals on. Patrick, if you're available, you can pop on too. I'd love to have you with your insight. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the threat to the northern and southern border, what they're doing, how they're building up an army against us, how they've infiltrated our borders. And we have active army militia from outside of our country, currently living, breathing in the United States of America. We're going to talk about this. So you're not going to want to miss next Saturday's episode. So you're going to need to text FIGHT 91776 to register for next week's. Again, every week we're going to be bringing you these informative information and then actions on what you can do to protect your family. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you, Patrick Byrne. I know this, you're overseas, and I appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. Thank you so much for being here. Raj, thank you so much for facilitating this. And is there anything else, Raj, you need to say? If not, I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody. And as always, as I end, God bless you and God bless the United States of America.
Take action, my friends. Take action, action, action. As soon as this broadcast ends, something's going to come up. Something's going to show up on your social media. Your phone's going to ring. Something's going to show up as soon as the broadcast ends. Please share the replay link with your friends. Take the actions. Make sure you catch Christie's program the next week here coming up. Thank you, Christie. Back to you.
Thank you guys so much. We can win if we're united and if you act. The time to act is now. The storm is upon us. It is here. As always, on the front lines and in the fight for you. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.